How clear is the water in the River Spree? And how deep can you see into it? These junior school children from Berlin are finding answers to those and many other questions with the help of Magnus Knigge. They're conducting scientific experiments on board a specially equipped vessel.
Das heißt, hier hätten wir 1 Meter, -10 sind 90, nochmal -10 sind wie viel?
80.
Nochmal -10? Okay, also haben wir...
I'm on the Cormoran, an old tugboat that's been transformed into a floating science laboratory for school pupils. Magnus Knigge works on the ship for Germany's National Volunteer Service. He's helping the children explore the natural environment. Magnus tells me the idea behind the boat is to give young people a taste of the local environment so that they can relate to it better. He says it also aims to show them that the Spree is not just a drainage system carrying waste out of Berlin, but also a habitat and a source of food. Magnus hopes that this will give them more respect for the water and their environment. Magnus is trained as an assistant biotechnician. He'll soon be beginning a university degree course. Through volunteering, he's gaining practical experience while he waits to begin his course. Below deck, the learning continues with the help of Christina Parmann. She's giving the kids a biology lesson. The former high school teacher is 36 years older than Magnus Knigge, but she's also a volunteer. It proves the scheme is suitable for older participants too. In fact, a fifth of the volunteers are over 50, and like Christina Parmann, many of them are retired. The knowledge and experience of older people is particularly valuable to the National Volunteer Service.
Jetzt möchte ich mal von euch wissen, die am Mikroskop jetzt gerade sind. Habt ihr was entdeckt?
Ja, da bewegt sich was.
Ja, was?
The children are learning how to use state-of-the-art microscopes to identify life forms. They're obviously benefiting from Christina Parmann's dedication. But what's in it for her? What makes someone want to volunteer after a lifetime of hard work? She said she does it because she still feels very healthy, although she's retired. She tells me she used to teach chemistry and biology and realized she could still do something meaningful. She still enjoys working with children and young people, she tells me, and likes teaching them things she herself finds fascinating and believes will interest them too. Magnus Knigge is not only volunteering to help others, he's living on social benefits at the moment, and the voluntary work brings in a little more income. Magnus tells me that volunteers get another 175 euros on top of their regular benefits, and no money is subtracted. It really is an additional help, he says, and they pay your Social Security contributions too. I think 175 euros for an entire month's work isn't much. That's what I call low wages. So why do so many people do it? Currently, Germany's National Volunteer Service has 35,000 participants. Johannes Hock is another of them. I accompany him to a home for the elderly where he volunteers. Johannes tells me that death and old age were important issues for him that he wanted to investigate further. He felt a need to have more contact with elderly people and felt a residential home would be a good place to achieve that, because in a place like that, death is part of life. Watching Johannes at work takes me back to my time doing civilian service. Back then, it was an option for people who didn't want to serve in the military. When the German government ended military conscription last year, and with it the civilian alternative, it introduced the National Volunteer Service. Today's recreational activity is bowling, and Johannes is rounding up some players.
Guten Tag, Frau Metten. Hallo, hier ist der Johannes.
Johannes goes from room to room trying to drum up interest. It's 3:30 p.m. and Johannes is preparing the dining room for the activity. It's the last time he'll do this. His term of service ends in a week. After that, he'll also have to pay his own Social Security contributions. For him, the fact that the service pays that for volunteers was a strong argument for joining. He tells me he's very relieved at not having to worry about that. The last 10 months have been relatively worry-free, he says, in comparison to what lies ahead in terms of having to look around for another project.
Im Vergleich zu dem, was jetzt kommt für mich, mit diesem immer gucken, dass man wieder ein Projekt hat.
Und loslassen. Gut.
The bowling has begun. Even if it is just the computer game version.
Ja, nicht schlecht, da stehen.
Johannes is on hand to help the players out.
Beisammen, die kriegen wir noch.
The home has already found his successor. There's no shortage of applications for volunteer positions. This institution alone often receives 15 applications a month, though it only has 4 vacancies a year to fill. Uwe Gebühr is the manager of the care home. He can no longer imagine running the institution without the help of volunteers.
Hier im Haus konkret würden wir,
He tells me that without them, at least 4 afternoon activities would have to be cancelled.
haben, die wegfallen würden. Das heißt, an 4 Nachmittagen in der Woche...
Since at least 20 residents take part in each activity, that would represent a drastic reduction in quality, he says.
Dann mindestens 20 Bewohner. Dann ist das schon eine Qualitätsminimierung, die wir da hinzunehmen haben.
Und schwingen und los. Super.
Ja.
Ja. Ja, ja, ja.
Ja. Da.
Ja. Ja. Schon ganz gut.
It seems that securing the volunteer position of your choice isn't all that easy. Johannes Hoch was lucky. In the future, he wants to work in the theater, producing plays about the experience of being old.
Bin sehr zufrieden mit dem.
Johannes tells me he's happy he decided to become a volunteer. He says he doesn't see it as an altruistic activity for society's benefit. You get a letter from a government office thanking you for your dedication, he tells me. For him, though, it's a personal thing. He's doing it for himself, he says, not for society.
Schon gar nicht für die Gesellschaft.
It's another matter for volunteer Angelika Schöppi. She says she is doing it for the good of society. Angelika works for a non-profit organization that enables people on low incomes to enjoy Berlin's rich cultural scene. She sees it as an important social duty. Today, she has 2 assignments to tackle. A year ago, Angelika Schöppi was unemployed. The National Volunteer Service has changed that. Angelika says it gives her something to do again and makes her feel needed. She says she likes doing something meaningful that's also a lot of fun. She says it's a good way to fill the remaining time until she retires by doing something useful. Theaters and other cultural venues around the city send unsold tickets to the organization Angelika works for. Angelika distributes them free of charge to people who would otherwise not be able to afford them. With that done, Angelika sets off for her second task of the day. She's going to a local library to do some advertising for her employer. The former civil engineer has always had a passion for cultural events. At the library, she chats to locals about the organization's work. Angelika understands her target group. She too relies on state benefits. The money she earns volunteering is a welcome supplement. She says it allows her to top up her unemployment benefits, which aren't much. She lost her job at the age of 55, she says, and she has little chance of finding another one at her age. But she tells me it'll be a while before she retires, and volunteering is a good way to bridge the gap until then. Retirement is now just a year away for Angelika Schilpi. I returned to the floating laboratory to meet Uwe Schneider, one of the founders of the non-profit organization that runs it. The ship's work used to be done by casual short-term volunteers. The National Volunteer Service enables Uwe to have a stable, regular workforce. For Uwe, that's a great improvement. He tells me how lucky the project is to have been allocated 2 volunteers who are both highly motivated and knowledgeable and can work at the same time. He says the National Volunteer Service has been a real boon for the science boat. The situation seems to benefit everybody involved, especially the children. They learn lots of valuable information from volunteers like Magnus Knigge. But the National Volunteer Service also has its critics. Some people say it's just a way of getting people to work for very little money. Charitable organizations say the 35,000 volunteer positions available are far too few to meet their needs. I agree that it would be a good thing to increase the number of funded volunteer places in Berlin, but I also think their dedication should be rewarded with better pay.